Hi everyone, how are you all doing? Can you please confirm if you can see me, if you can hear me, and if you can also see my screen? Okay, great. So, this is our third session of the Essentials Concept Clarity series, and I am very happy for those of you who are consistently attending the classes, the ones who are watching the recordings, the ones who are attempting the mock tests. And the first mock test has already closed. The second mock test, I believe, is about to close soon. So, how has your experience with this series been so far? What do you think about the classes, the PPTs, and the mock tests? What role is it playing in your preparation? If anybody wants to share, if you'd like, you can raise your hand and let us know. Otherwise, the chat box is also there. Okay, so there are already a few responses. He is saying good, Sarah is saying great, Khushi is also saying good, and Shifali is also saying that she is learning a lot. There are 12 classes in this total, so need more classes. क्या है धीरे धीरे classes आती रहेंगी. Yes, thank you Anvesha and Anju. Yes, so I see that three hands are raised: Harsheen, Khushi, and Abhishek. So we can go in that order.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the classes. I really like the PPTs too. They're very straightforward and very engaging. After the classes are done, the next day I go over the on recording and make my notes. And I think that's really helped me clarify a lot of the doubts that I've previously had. And I don't make errors anymore in simple topics that I did before. So it's very helpful in that way.
I'm so glad to hear that because ultimately the goal is to reduce the number of errors that we are making. And the approach that you're following of revisiting your notes after attending the classes is very helpful. So that's something I recommend to all my students. Once you have watched the class, you're making your notes while watching the class, but then reviewing your notes after some time period is also very important. Why? Because see, today we're gonna be doing the memory chapter, and a very important portion in memory is about forgetting. So, what happens if you do not revise the content? There is someone who has done a lot of contribution in this area. Can you guess who that person is? Yeah, Sarah has already written the forgetting curve, but can you also tell what's the name of the person? Ebbinghaus. So, what do we understand from the forgetting curve? What is the main insight? What is the main understanding from the forgetting curve? And if you see, it is literally like this. If I can draw and show it to you, the forgetting curve, the shape of it is like this. The initial point of the distribution is very, very steep. It's like this. So, what does it tell you? This is about the time that has elapsed, and this is the information that is forgotten. This is actually a concept by Ebbinghaus, as Sarah is correctly putting in the chat box. This is something that will be discussed in a lot of detail in the entire CUET PG entrance preparation course that we have. So, memory decay happens fastest in the first 9 hours. Yes, you're absolutely correct, which is why revision should be done when? What is the ideal time of doing revision after the class? Can you tell me the time duration from what Ebbinghaus's curve is saying? And you can take the hint from Sarah's comment. What is the ideal time frame for doing your revision after attending the classes? Which hour to which hour? You already have the answer in Sarah's comment. Or maybe Sarah, you want to answer yourself? Come on, guys, it's very simple. You are attending these classes. I want you to learn something new. We cannot be quiet when it's time to give responses, right? Yes. So the earlier you revise it, the better it is. But make sure that you're revising it 9 hours before. Otherwise, as more time elapses, the more we tend to forget. Yes. So I would like more interaction in today's class because then there's no point of having these sessions. And Khushi, your hand is also raised. And there was one more person whose hand was raised. I think he wanted to say something, but he is lowered his hand. So if you still want to share something, you can raise your hand. Until then, Khushi, you can continue.
Good evening. So my experience has been wonderful, and मतलब मेरा जो ओपिनियन है वो ये है कि ये ज़्यादा यूजफुल इसलिए है क्योंकि आपने एमसीक्यू से ज़्यादा गोल रखे। दैट इज द मेन थिंग वी वुड नीड आफ्टर द क्लास। एंड लास्ट क्लास में मतलब I have been consistently practicing learning topic from my own self also. जो schedules of reinforcement वाला parts था. So I was getting more confused in it. But after the last class, I have improved a lot in it. And दूसरी अच्छी चीज मेरे को ये लगी कि देर इज ऑल्सो एन ऑप्शन फॉर सेकेंड अटेम्प्ट। लाइक मैंने फर्स्ट और सेकेंड दोनों क्लासेस के एमसीक्यूज डे राइट आफ्टर द क्लास, मतलब जैसे आज क्लास हो रही है तो मैं कल हाथ के हाथ लगा लेती हूँ, तब आई ट्राई टू अटेम्प्ट इट। सो मेरे को तो काफी अच्छा लग रहा।
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Khushi. In our main course, actually, the reattempt available is there for 5 trials. So, sirf 2 times nahi, but you can attempt the mock 5 times. So that's another great feature. Parth, there is no Telegram group as of now, but the 3 WhatsApp groups that we have, they are open and we keep on sharing important stuff there. Otherwise, if you have a question, you can drop it there as well. And I am pursuing masters in psychology. I am targeting UGC NET. Can I attend the session and any course? Yeah, so we are actually gonna launch our UGC NET course very, very soon by this month itself, and we have great resource persons for that. I am one of them. And till the time we are launching that course, you are recommended to watch these essential series because they will be building your foundation and they will be helping you get used to the studying part of it. It'll help you build your pace and momentum. So you will get habituated before you enroll into the classes. Yes. And one more thing I wanted to correct from before is that someone I think mentioned that first 9 hours. So when we actually do the Ebbinghaus curve in our actual preparation course classes, you will see that it is the first hour, right? तो पूरा उसने टाइम ऐसा दे रखा है कि इस टाइम से इस टाइम इतने परसेंट इन्फॉर्मेशन लूज हो जाएगी, इस टाइम से इस टाइम इतने परसेंट इन्फॉर्मेशन लूज हो जाएगी, एंड द फास्टेस्ट स्टेप यू विल सी स्टार्ट्स टू हैपन इन द फर्स्ट आवर itself, which is why one revision right after attending the class and then another revision maybe the next morning can be a helpful approach. Yes. And two people's hand are raised. We can just take your responses and then we can attend the session. We can start with the session. So we have Drishya. Her hand is raised from a long time. And then another person, please help me understand the correct pronunciation of your name. The one with the blue ball. And then you can start once Drishya is done.
Yes, ma'am. I felt your courses very informative. They are very creative in nature when I see your PPTs. So I felt very nice. And ma'am, I also wanted to ask that would you be covering all the topics of UGC NET in this course?
Most of the topics that are relevant to UGC NET. So the course is actually under construction, and when we have all the details, we can let you know. But don't worry about the resource persons. We're actually conducting multiple demo sessions with them, and if we don't like a resource person, we are not gonna have that person. So in terms of conceptual clarity and the creativity, as you mentioned, the ability to make concepts simple, please be assured that you will have that in all subjects, no matter regardless of the fact whoever is teaching. But if you enjoy my teaching, I will be teaching some of the UGC NET topics also, so don't worry about that. Yes. And
Okay, ma'am.
yes, yes. Now the next person, and please introduce yourself also. What's the correct pronunciation of your name? I actually cannot hear you. So I still cannot hear her. Is it only the problem on my end or others also?
She's not audible.
Okay, so maybe you can put your query in the chat box and then I'll take it. Last question by Ravinder. I'm targeting CUET PG 27. My dream college is DU. Safe score for DU. I want OB and heard of placement. Strong reason to join DU. How to enroll in CUET PG course. So we will send the link to enroll in the CUET PG course on the WhatsApp group today as well. Or if you want us to reach out to you, you can drop your number in the chat box and then someone from our team will reach out to you. And safe score for DU actually varies from year to year depending upon the difficulty level of the exam. For example, CUET PG 2024 and 2025 were a little simple, so a lot of people were scoring on the higher end, which is why the cutoff for DU was also a little on the higher end. So if anybody is getting 280, they would get into DU. But this year, the 26 paper was quite difficult, and even Air 1 score is 268 this time, which means that the cutoff will also fall because paper was difficult and people have scored lower as compared to the previous years. So this time, somewhere around 245 to 250 seems like a safe score. So it will vary from year to year, but you just have to make sure that you are scoring. Um, when I teach you stats in the main course, you'll understand better. But what I mean is that आपको average से काफी ऊपर score करना है. Let's say आपको, if you understand the concept of Z score, maybe you wanna lie between +2 to +3 category. More on this in the main course once you'll understand the Z score concept. But basically यही है कि आपको higher end में score करना है तो आपको मिल सकता है. I cannot give you a number because these things change from year to year. 255 you should be able to get this time. Okay, so now let us finally begin with the session. This is our third session, and I'm sure a lot of you who are attending consistently already know what the cyclopedia is. And if you don't know who we are, you can actually check our YouTube recordings. I have introduced ourselves so many times. And for those of you who were asking about the course, so the CUET PG course, the resource person, I am the only one. We don't have anyone else. I am the one who takes classes for all the subjects. And the PPTs are also created by us only. Manvi does a great job at making the PPTs. You can already see that. And about the early bird registration. So last time I was telling you 50% of the early bird seats were filled. Right now, we have very few left. So if you want, you can enroll yourself. The earlier you start your preparation, the better it is. And if you want some more discount, you can actually bring in your friends also because we have group discounted seats also available. So yes, that is about the course. Now let us finally start with memory. And I would like to know from you all that can you tell me what are the most important contributors in the field of memory, or what are some of the most important topics that we study in the field of memory that are asked in entrances? From your understanding, like you must have studied this topic in your bachelor's or in your school. So type in the chat box and tell me most important contributors or most important concepts or terminologies in the chat box. Okay, Hermann Ebbinghaus, working memory. STM, LTM, working memory, forgetting. Ebbinghaus, अरे थोड़ा और सोचो ना. Why we are making Ebbinghaus the king of memory? There are so many more people. Memory models. Okay. Working memory, SCM, LTM, Baddeley, theories of memory, long-term memory, Tulving. Okay. So I see that a lot of you are talking about topics like sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Someone also talked about the types of long-term memory. And as we know, this is something that has been given by Tulving, right? Then someone also talked about working memory model that has been given by Baddeley and Hitch. 90% of you are talking about this. And while this is important, this is asked in entrances, but a topic that a lot of students neglect. And even I didn't very surprisingly hear about those topics from you. Only one person talked about it, and that person is Vedahi. And to some extent, Supriya also going in that direction. So Vedahi was talking about two people. She talked about Frederick Bartlett and Elizabeth Loftus. Have you heard about these people before, or is this your first time hearing about them? You can tell in the chat box. You can write first time, or you can also say heard before, depending upon what your experience is. So a lot of you are saying first time, first time, first time. Yes, exactly. Because these things are not always taught in colleges, college lectures and all. And even if it is written about it in textbook, there's a very small portion, so students tend to neglect it. I still remember, I think in one of the textbooks, Loftus experiment is given in a box. And when I was a student myself, I thought that ये तो box है, इसको क्यों करना, चलो उसको छोड़ देते हैं. And later I understood the importance of getting into all of these topics also, which is why I think it will be helpful to teach about the work of Bartlett and Loftus to you, because these things should be understood by students. These are also important. We cannot neglect these topics. So in today's class, we'll mostly be talking about Bartlett and Loftus. Now, those of you who are hearing about it for the first time, you might not know a lot about it, but those of you who have heard before, you might have some little idea. So can you rate from 1 to 100 how much knowledge do you have about this topic right now? And there is no judgment here. We are not Google, we are not ChatGPT. We don't expect to know 100 out of 100. If that was the case, why would we be attending these classes? Zero तो मत लिखो, कुछ तो पता होगा आपको. Okay, so majorly 0, 0, 0, 1.5, 10, 0, 0. Abhishek, quite impressive, 70 on 10 knowledge. So 70 on 100. So Abhishek, I will ask you a lot of questions in today's class and then you have to respond, okay? I will ask questions from you only majorly. And Isha, you also. Abhishek and Isha, get ready for a lot of questions. Yes, okay, I like the confidence. Very good. Uzma, Abhishek, and Isha, lot of questions for you today. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna tell you about a story from my childhood, and that will hopefully also encourage you to reflect upon your. I think someone's mic is on. Please close it. Yes. So what I was saying that I will be telling you about a very famous childhood story of mine, and hopefully that will also encourage you to reflect upon your past experiences and your childhood stories. So I am a very big foodie, honestly, and my entire family has that perception of me that whenever they take the name Vidhi, food comes to their mind, and that is why I also give a lot of food examples in these classes. Okay, so my family members and my cousins always tell me that whenever we used to go out or whenever we had a lot of food on the plate, you used to be the one to literally pounce on the plate and take all of the food to yourself. But when I hear that story, I don't personally think that it is very true. I don't think that this is exactly what happened because my experience of it is very different. As a child, I think that it was my cousins, it was my brothers who used to take most of the food. So, has it ever happened with you that you reflect upon something that may have happened with you in the past? And when you or your siblings and your family members or your friends are talking about it, everybody has different versions of the same incident, but in a very different manner. Has it ever happened with you? If you can reflect upon it. Yeah, so that is a common experience. Sara, Andesha, Heer, Mariam, Isha, Arsheen, yes, Khushi, Firdaus, and the rest. That is a very common experience actually. And what happens in these stories mostly is that because there are siblings, there are cousins, there is a natural tendency to just make your cousin look like the villain. And then you're like, hey, this is not what happened. Tell what you also did, right? And what you're saying is just the opposite. And naturally, there's a lot of spice, there's a lot of mirch and masala that is added. So that is a very common experience that most of us have experienced. So what does that mean? Let us follow it up with some MCQ. And what do you think the answer of this question should be if you apply the same logic what we discussed? Do you think it would be true or would it be false? I am also foodie. So Abhishek, that's a commonality between both of us. Yes. So a lot of you are correctly answering it as false. So what does that mean? What does that tell us? Memories that we claim to remember vividly and accurately doesn't always guarantee the fact that yahi hua tha, yahi reliable hai, yahi correct hai, right? So that is gonna be the starting point of today's session, and from here we are gonna build up. Now, if I can ask you the answer of this, who was the first person to propose that memory is a reconstructive process? And a hint, we have taken the name of this person before, whether he is the one that took the name of this person. So if you were listening closely, you will be able to answer. Wow. अरे आई एम गिविंग यू सच अ बिग हिंट whether ही ने क्लास में आंसर दिया तो whether ही आप ही बता दो आंसर एंड ओ आई थिंक आई शुड आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम ईशा and who was that another foodie person अभिषेक yes and उज़मा what is the answer आपको तो पता होना चाहिए आपने तो 50-80 knowledge बोला है so those who are saying Bartlett you are correct and those who are saying A you are unfortunately giving the wrong answer. It is not Ebbinghaus. It is Bartlett who has said that memory is a reconstructive process. And the approach of Ebbinghaus versus the approach of Bartlett is very, very different when it comes to understanding memory. And we will be understanding it in the form of a story, in the form of an evolution, as we always do in each of the classes. So I would like to take the example of a video clip here, right? All of us take video clips on our phone, or all of us take certain videos and we put it on our story on Instagram. And Instagram also has this archive section, and you can go up to the stories that you had posted many years back. In my account, also, I have stories from 7 to 8 years back, and sometimes I like to go up and revisit it and see how my life was at that time. So, do you think those video clips are exactly the same, or have they changed over time? The video clip that I shot in 2019 and I uploaded it on my story, will it be the same in the year 2026 also, or will it undergo some change? It will remain the same, right? Yes, it will remain the same. So, many years back, in the historical perspective, if you view it like that, at that time, people used to believe that memory is also like a video clip. Memory is also like an Instagram story that you put it on the archive. That what has happened on that day, what has happened many, many years back, what you recollect this year, what you recall, and what you retrieve is gonna be exactly the same as what happened in the past. But that is not actually true. So if you read the text here, it is very clearly written that people used to believe that memory is like an instant replay. And if you have difficulty understanding this concept, remember about the Instagram story example that I gave you. तो आपको याद रहेगा कि Instagram stories don't change, they remain the same over time. So people used to think that memories are like an instant replay. They will be replayed exactly in the same way as how they were stored back then in the first place, but this is not true. With the research and with the experiments of two very important people, Frederick Bartlett and Elizabeth Loftus, we went on to understand that memory is not an exact copy of reality. If it's not an exact copy of reality, meaning that there are some changes happening. That means memory is a constructive process and reconstructive process. What does that mean? Constructive and reconstructive. If you take the example of Lego blocks, if you make a building, let's say you make a tower using the Lego blocks, but then reconstructing it, meaning that you didn't like this piece, so you remove that piece and you put another block there, you used another color piece there, you kept on reconstructing it as per your liking over the attempts. The same thing is with memory. It doesn't mean that the way how you experience it for the first time, it will remain the same even after many years. Memory keeps on getting constructed, it keeps on getting reconstructed over and over again. And that is why what you remember right now is actually a product of a lot of revision and a lot of altering over time. This is what they mean by constructive processing. What does that mean? Original memory is modified. What is it modified using? Modified using new information, modified using new experiences, modified using the very existing knowledge that you might have. Going back to the example that I was sharing from my childhood, or maybe you can also reflect upon your own personal experiences. What you remember keeps on getting changed by the new things that are happening with you, the new information that you are presented with, or your own personal belief system, your own personal schema also. Yes. Now, what do you think about the passage of time in terms of the reconstruction and accuracy of memory retrieval? Do you think that as more and more time passes by, memories get more and more accurate or memories get more and more inaccurate as more and more time passes by? Yes, memories get more and more inaccurate as more and more time passes by. So that is something that we understand about the passage of time. So the more the time passes, the more experiences we have, the more knowledge, the more information we are getting. And that is why more inaccuracies start creeping in. We think that what we remember is correct, but in reality, that's not the guarantee that it will be correct. Because memory keeps on getting reinterpreted again and again and again. तो वो literally पूरा construct होके हमारे दिमाग में वापस retrieve होता है. Now, memory actually has three stages in coding, storage, and retrieval. More on this, I will teach you when we are doing the information processing approach in our main course. But right now, if I have to tell you in very brief, encoding basically means that when you are attending to information, when you're registering it for the first time, storage means that you're holding that information, and retrieval means when you have to bring it back to your conscious awareness. So, to give you an example, right now you are listening to my lecture in class. What would good encoding look like in this case? You are paying attention to what I'm saying. You are reading the PPT, you are taking your own notes. That means you are paying attention and you are properly encoding everything. But let's say in between, you get distracted by your friend's phone, and then you see your friend has sent you some reels, and then you get lost in the reels. So that means good encoding has not been done because you didn't pay attention. Storage meaning the information has not been held, the information got faded due to some reason, and retrieval meaning that when you are finally giving the exam, when you're finally writing the CUET, PG, UGC NET, whatever exam, there was some distraction at that time. Or maybe there was this song that was playing in your head. Because of that, you were not able to retrieve the information properly. You were not able to bring back the information properly because that song, which is trending on Reels these days, got you very distracted by it. So that is what they mean that errors can occur at any of the three stages: encoding, storage, or retrieval. Okay. So before we actually get into the whole process, before we understand the contribution of Bartlett and Loftus, there are some important keywords for us. Very simple to understand. It's nothing difficult. Just listen carefully. Constructive perception and perceptual interference. Okay. So has it ever been with you that when we were children, we used to look up high in the sky, we used to look at clouds, and then we used to ask our friends or we used to ask our siblings that what do you see? When you look at the cloud, what shape do you see? So if I can ask you, let's say, yeah, that has happened with you, right? So if you are looking at the cloud, you are probably seeing a horse, but your friend is rather seeing a teddy bear. Yes, or your friend, you still do it. Okay, so what do you see, Anju? Can you tell us? Looking at the cloud, what do you see? Whether you see a horse, or you see a unicorn, or you see something completely different, something else. You see faces. Okay, so why is this happening? I see a horse. My friend sees a unicorn. He sees a teddy bear. Anju sees faces. Why is that happening? That is happening because each one of us are different people. Each one of us have our own beliefs, our own schemas, our own experiences, our own knowledge. And with the help of our knowledge, experience, schemas, experiences, the people that we are, this perception is guided depending upon that. So that is known as constructive perception. And if I can also give you the example of Rorschach-Ink blot test, you must be aware what that is. There are 10 cards in total, and on each of the card there is certain ink blot that is there, and you have to interpret what that is. Some people say that this is looking like Santa Claus. Another person says that a bonfire is happening. Another person says that two elephants are there on the second or the third card. Why is that happening? Because everybody has their own experiences, everybody has their own expectations, everybody has their own context. So depending upon these factors, the way how perception happens is very constructive. It varies upon all of these factors. And this is also known as top-down processing. So one we have bottom-up processing and then we have top-down processing. Top-down processing is when you are using your, okay, let's use this trick. So let's just say that this is a cloud. Okay, this is a cloud and these are two friends. This is a cloud and these are two friends, and this person is person A and person B is required to report what they see. So this person is saying that I see a face, and this person is saying that I see a horse. Why? Because probably in childhood, person B used to go for a lot of horse riding, and person A maybe is a makeup artist or a dermatologist, so they always see faces wherever they go. So we are always starting from a top-down approach, meaning that we're starting from our cognition, we are starting from what is stored in our memory. This is a trick. Don't use it in the literal sense, but just a short trick that will help you understand the meaning of top-down processing. So when we are using our past experiences, where are the past experiences stored? Somewhere in the brain. Where is our brain located? In the top, right? So you are using your existing memory, you are using your existing experience, your existing information or knowledge, your existing beliefs that are stored here in top, and then using this as a starting point, you are going downwards and looking at the stimulus in front of you. That is a trick to remember top-down processing better. Right, so have you understood top-down processing? No, it is not hypothesis to conclusion. I think you are confusing inductive versus deductive reasoning, but they are two different things. But just using this example about top-down processing, have you understood this? If yes, you can say yes. If you've not understood, you can say no. There is no problem in saying a no. अगर नहीं समझ आया तो आप बता सकते हो. Okay. So seems like some of you have not understood it. Actually, top down versus bottom up is a topic that comes under perception. It is not really an agenda in today's class. So after the session is over, I can take your questions because right now we need to focus on Frederick and Loftus. We cannot be spending too much time here. टॉप डाउन का मतलब बेसिकली यही है कि in order to make perception, you use your existing knowledge or existing schemas, and then you use that to guide what you see, and then you use that to make perception. That is all about top down processing that needs to be done. Yes, here top down, bottom up are different, and inductive deductive are different. You are a course student, right? So when we do this in the perception chapter and research methodology, then I will explain it to you in a better way. And those of you who have not understood, please write down your question specifically. What about this did you not understand? And once the class is done, once we're moving towards MCQs, I'll answer you. Okay, now let's continue with this. The next topic that we have here is perceptual interference. So has it ever happened with you that you are at a restaurant or you are at a cafe and there is very loud music playing? And because of that, the server who is next to you, who is asking you, what do you want to order? You are not able to listen to them properly, or you're not even able to discuss with your family that what do you want to order. This happened with me only yesterday. The place was blasting such a loud music. I could not hear anything that my family members wanted to share. I couldn't even hear the server, right? So it was very irritating, honestly, because a lot of stimulus around you that is very irrelevant, stimulus that is unnecessary, that stimulus is competing with the important stimulus. The music is competing with the order that I'm trying to place. So that is called perceptual interference. What is the meaning of interference? Interference means that when somebody is interfering for no reason, you don't want that person there, right? You're like, तुम्हें क्या, तुम क्यों interfere कर रहे हो? जाओ यहाँ से, तुम्हारी जरूरत नहीं है, तुम परेशान कर रहे हो. Because of you, we are not able to focus, right? Two people are talking, but third person is interfering. Just go away from here. You're not letting us focus on the conversation. So that is perceptual interference, where there is irrelevant stimuli that is competing, which makes it difficult for you to focus on that stimulus which is important and relevant. So you can take this example of loud music that I shared with you, and with this, perceptual interference will become very easy to understand. Right, so Just to summarize both these things once again so that there's no confusion, constructive perception just refers to the fact that if there are two different people and a single stimulus, everybody will have their own perception of what they see. Why? Because everybody has different experiences, everybody has different knowledge, different schemas, different beliefs, different information, and they are using those very different schemas to guide their perception. That is why top down approach. And perceptual interference, meaning when there are a lot of stimuli around you, and because of that, you are not able to focus on that stimuli, which is actually important because a lot of interference is happening. Now, have you understood? The ones who were saying no before, Manasvi, Drishya, Bhavika, and okay, no one else. Now, have you understood it? How is this related to memory? Because when we understand entire reconstructive process, then these points will help us to inform our understanding better. Okay, I'm glad that here Manasvi, Drishya, and Bhavika, your doubts are clear. Now I can confidently move ahead. Yes. So far I've been telling you so many times that memory keeps on getting reconstructed, memory keeps on getting changed. It is not the same always. It keeps on getting altered after the event has taken place. Why? Because with time, the more time that passes, more and more information we get, more and more interference happens. And that is why more and more reinterpretation also takes place. Right? So now there was an MCQ in the starting of this class where people were voting that Ebbinghaus is the one that said that memory is an active process. And I told you that that is not the correct answer. Now you will understand why. So, as I told you, originally it was understood that memory is more like a video clip. What you record at that time will remain the same at the time of retrieval also. Ebbinghaus is the one who believed in such kind of an approach. And you may also know that he has done that entire nonsense syllable experiment. Yes, where there were trigrams, meaning nonsense syllables, let's say things that don't make any sense, right? Consonants we know A, E, I, O, U के अलावा जो भी letters होते हैं, these don't make any sense, right? So he had done the entire nonsense syllables experiment. And he believes that memory is a passive process, meaning that it is more like a video clip, nothing is changing over time. See here, what does passive memory mean? Memory is a simple storage system. It reproduces information exactly how at the time of retrieval as it was during encoding. But this view was challenged by Frederick Bartlett and Elizabeth Loftus, who said that no, memory is not passive. Memory is very active. Memory is active, meaning that memory keeps on getting reconstructed over time. Why? Because as more time passes, more information comes up, more and more interference happens, and that is why you keep on reinterpreting things. So जितना time बीतेगा उतना ज़्यादा reinterpretation होगी, उतना ज़्यादा reconstruct हो जाएगी memory. Now this historical background I have already taught you, but we can just go over the slides about Ebbinghaus only. That initially they used to believe that memory is a passive process. How does it happen? It happens through associations between different stimuli. It is all about accuracy and repetition. Keep on repeating the same thing. You will recall it exactly how it was at the time of encoding. And Ebbinghaus was the one who believed in that. I told you that he used the nonsense syllable experiment. I will teach you about Ebbinghaus in a lot of detail in our full course, but for today, let's focus on Loftus and Bartlett only. Yes, but people like Bartlett and Loftus told him and contradicted this view that it is not that artificial also, and that is not how memory works in real life. It is way more constructive. And now we're going to study the experiments of Bartlett and Loftus, and you will only understand why they are saying कि reconstructive, reconstructive. ऐसा क्यों है? वो आपको experiment से समझ आएगा. So I will be starting by telling you about the experiment of Bartlett. And for that, I need you to look at this essay or this passage, we can say. You don't have to read the whole thing, but you can just read a few lines of it. And then I will tell you what this experiment, what this activity was about. So I'm giving you a few seconds to read it, or maybe I will read it out loud for you. One night, two young men from Egulac went down to the river to hunt seals, and while they were there, it became foggy and calm. Then they heard war cries and they thought, maybe this is a war party. They escaped to the shore and hid behind a log. Now canoes came up and they heard the noise of paddles and saw one canoe coming up to them. There were 5 men in the canoe and they said, what do you think? We wish to take you along. We are going up to the river to make war on the people. One of the young men said, I have no arrows. Arrows are in the canoe, they said. I will not go along. I might be killed. My relatives do not know where I have gone. But you, he said, turning to the other, may go with them. So one of the young men went, but the other returned home. So let's just read it till here, because what is written in the story, understanding that is not relevant for us. This is just an example. Okay, so what did Bartlett do? Bartlett actually bought some participants, and these participants were students. And very interestingly, these students were British, right? And do you know this essay, this passage is a very famous cultural folk tale that is prevalent among a group of people that is Native Americans. So, what is Bartlett doing? Bartlett is very intentional about the fact that the story or the essay that I'm choosing belongs to the Native American culture, but the participants that I'm choosing in my experiment are British students. Now, what did he do? He invited the British students and he told them that you have to read this. And then, after reading this, you have to recall this. And there can be two types of recall that can be used here. Let me take you through what those two types of recall are. Either you can use repeated reproduction or you can use serial reproduction. Now, what does that mean? We have serial reproduction and repeated reproduction. तो repeated reproduction में क्या हो रहा है कि a single participant is made to recall the story again and again after specific time intervals. But in serial reproduction, it is more like Chinese whispers. It's like one story is getting passed from the next person, then to the next person, like how it is there in Passing the Parcel. And you can see this image also. कि इस person को story सुनाई, then this person told the story to this person, then she told it to this person, and then they keep on passing it on. So this is serial reproduction. So I'm gonna repeat it for you to help you understand what exactly is happening. Bartlett chose this essay. This essay is a very famous cultural story among the group of Native Americans. And then he invited students who are his British participants, and then he asked them to read it. And after reading it, they were asked to recall it through serial reproduction and repeated reproduction. And I've already told you what serial is, what is repeated. Repeated may there is one person only, and one person has to recall it after certain time intervals. But what is serial reproduction? In serial reproduction, there is no time gap, but person is sharing from one to the other. So one to other person. Okay, now you have understood the main setup of this. Now you only tell me, what do you think might have happened during the time of recall? Let's say that a lot of time has passed. Certain number of days have passed. What are some of the findings that you expect to see in the final recall? अब recall में क्या आपको notice करने को मिलेगा? Can you tell me in the chat box? What do you think? And the answer somewhere lies in reconstructive process of memory, because we are understanding reconstruction of memory. So this is a hint that the essay will be reconstructed. Now, what do you expect to see? What do you think might happen? People's knowledge and interference. Okay, people's knowledge and inference affected the recall. Yes, that is correct. Discrepancies from the original story. Yes, that is correct. Changes in critical details. Yes, that is also correct. And I'm going to give you a hint. Bartlett very intentionally chose a very culturally different story. The story belonged to Native Americans, but participants were British. So, do you expect anything to do with the culture of the people also in the way how the story is recalled? Cultural influences. So, do you think the participants, if they are British, will the story that is recalled after time period, will it involve more British elements or will it involve more Native American elements? I'm talking about recall. British people, British participants, will they integrate aspects of British elements or Native American elements? Yes, they will integrate British elements, right? Because that is what they know, that is what their schema is built upon, that is what their knowledge and information is about. Yes. So now let us understand what were the results and what we got to see. So in this yellow table, all the findings have been written. And let me tell you that these findings are not very random. These findings point towards a very important pattern. So first thing that we noticed is omission. Omission meaning you cut down on something, like हम बोलते हैं ना कि ये recall करते हुए आप खा गए इस चीज को, आपने skip कर दिया. That is omission. So the British participants, when they came across certain elements that seemed very culturally inconsistent to them, meaning ki that doesn't happen in British culture, that may happen in American culture, but not in British culture. So that was very unfamiliar to them. That was very culturally inconsistent for them. So while recalling, they left that out. They didn't even include that in their recall. उन्होंने छोड़ दिया उसको, skip कर दिया, खा लिया उन्होंने इसको. So omission is the first thing that he noticed at the time of recall. And secondly, what did he notice? Like you remember when I was reading out the essay to you, there were some parts of the story that felt very ambiguous. Some parts that sounded very illogical. Like you're not able to understand what is this person trying to say. क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं, कोई logic ही नहीं दिख रहा मुझे ऐसे में. So at the time of recall, those participants rationalized the story in a way that they rewrote it in a way that felt more logically understandable and logically consistent, using whatever their own inferences are. So omission happened wherein they skipped the important details, and rationalization also happened where they modified everything that they found ambiguous and they made it more understandable in their own words. And third thing, do you think they are just gonna subtract and skip and omit information, or can they also add their own things? Do you think British people might add elements of their own culture also? Is it just about skipping it, or can they add some of their own things also? Yes, they can very much add some of their own things also. So, along with skipping, they're also adding it, adding new details, and existing things are getting altered, new things are getting added. Elaboration also happened. And as I told you, the entire culturally inconsistent thing, the way how the story was narrated fit Western ideas of logic and Western ideas, belief patterns in a more better way. So originally it was a Native American story, but while it was recalled, it was reinterpreted in a way that it fits British and Western ideas of things and how things work in a better way. So all these four things were seen in the part of findings during recall of the Bartlett experiment, and this experiment is called War of the Ghosts. Because while reading the essay, you must have seen that they're trying to explain about a war situation. So, War of the Ghosts, that's why this is the name of it. So this very much proves that memory got reconstructed over time. That also means memory is guided by schemas. What are schemas? Basically, the way how we organize knowledge and information in our head using our past experiences, the knowledge, the information, everything that we have. So, on the basis of that, these things get altered, these things get affected, these things get reinterpreted. And that is how Bartlett proved that memory is not a passive reproduction, but rather it is very active, it is constructed, where past experiences are used to change and alter the knowledge and expectations that you're having. So I hope that with this you have understood what Bartlett was trying to do. And I don't want to skip the slide, so we can read this also just to enhance and add into your information. So Bartlett himself was a British psychologist and he made a major contribution to the understanding of memory. And in the MCQ also, like he's the first person that says that memory is a constructive process. So even before Loftus, he said it is constructive, right? And he challenged the work of whom? Tell me in the chat box. If Bartlett is saying memory is constructive, then he challenged the work of which person? Yes, he challenged or he contradicted the work of Ebbinghaus, because Ebbinghaus kept on saying passive, 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 but that is not true. Yes, he challenged that memory works like a passive storage system. And through the War of the Ghosts experiment, we have understood why this makes sense. Memories of past events and experiences are reconstructions, and that reconstruction is getting affected, it is getting impacted and tinted by what our cultural attitude is, what our personal habit is, rather than being an exact replica. Right? So, same thing reconstructed based on existing knowledge, belief, and expectation. And his work on schemas, we will see later also. And the two type of techniques that we use, serial reproduction and repeated reproduction. I told you in serial, it's like Chinese whispers from one person to the other. And if you've played a game of Chinese whisper, you also see that by the time the story comes back to the same person, it's not the same. In repeated reproduction, you are the only person repeating it again and again after some time. So that's all about Bartlett's War of the Ghost that we need to know. And see, I told you that this War of the Ghost experiment that he did was very relevant to the Native Americans. It was very culturally important to them, right? And using that, he just showed how memory operates in the real world. And we have already done both of this, what these two techniques are. Yeah, so mostly everything we have covered. And see, this red thing, the one that is written in red color, it just shows that you are not recalling the same thing as the exact verbatim it is, but rather it just goes on through transformation. And let me point out the fact that this transformation, this reconstruction is not random. It is rather very predictable. You can make sense. Obviously, the person will add in aspects of their own culture, right? So in that way, it is very predictable. It is not random, it is structured, it is predictable. Yes. And this table is more like a summary only, or you might see one or two new words in this. So I will just explain that to you what it is. We have gone over the fact that according to Bartlett, memory is reconstructive. It's not a literal reproduction. It keeps on getting affected by existing knowledge. We already know this. Secondly, schema theory by Bartlett, I'll tell you more about in the next slide. Effort after meaning. So tell me that when the British participants were reading that story, when they were recalling that story, did they add in some effort to make it more meaningful, more logical, more understandable based on their understanding of it? Yes, they did that, right? So they put in some effort. It's not like they're randomly saying anything that's coming to their mind. They put in effort. That is why effort after meaning is there. Can you please cover slide of Ebbinghaus? So Ebbinghaus is something that we will be covering in our full course. And if you're interested, you can join those classes. Yes, so coming back to this, effort after meaning just means that you are putting in effort. You are putting in intentional effort. You are putting in conscious effort to make sure that the information is coherent and meaningful. And of course, that leads to distortions. Cultural influence also, I have told you how British people were adding their own elements and they were removing the elements of Native Americans. So whether you're skipping unfamiliar elements or you're adding your own cultural elements, that is the cultural influence. Systematic distortions. Remember, I told you on the previous slide that this is not random. This is rather very structured and predictable. It makes sense why you would add elements of your culture and remove other cultures' elements. That is very predictable. And conventionalization just means that the essay that you're recalling after some time will be much shorter than the actual length of the essay. So that's also one more thing. If the actual essay includes 200 words, the one that you will tell will mostly include 60, 70 words. So it's much more shorter, it's much more simpler, right? So that is all about the War of the Ghosts. And he has also written a very important book, which is Remembering. Sometimes in entrances, they ask the books and authors also. Remember in the first class, I told you about book written by Hippocrates. This is the book written by Bartlett. So you can remember that. Now, lastly, this is the work on schema that Bartlett has done. So this is very interesting again. So they once again invited some participants and they made them look at the image of this stuffed toy that you see here. This actually to me looks like a panda. And then after some time, they asked them to draw this. And later what they found out that when a person is drawing, each of the drawings are very different. Someone made it look like Winnie the Pooh, but in reality it is a panda. It is very far away from how Winnie the Pooh actually looks. Or someone made it look like a teddy bear. And again, this is a panda. It doesn't look like a teddy bear at all. So that tells us that reconstructive nature is something that also applies to your visual memory. So schema effects are also there in visual memory क्योंकि आपने जो initially देखा था drawing के time पे तो वो बहुत अलग हो गया ना. So memory constructions also extends to how we visualize the world. Schemas distort visual memory by adding unexpected details. You'll see that there are some details which are in the drawing, but they're not in the original image, right? Sometimes in the drawings, people had made them wear certain clothes also, but in the actual one, this creature is not wearing any clothes. So they have added unexpected details. There is also a smile in this drawing, but here there is no such smile. So see, they have added some unexpected details or they have removed some of the details, right? So this just tells us that it also extends to visual memory. So that is all about Bartlett that we need to know. And now we can move on to the very interesting person, the work of Elizabeth Loftus. So I hope that you are understanding. I hope that you're following everything. If yes, can you respond with a thumbs up? Okay. Yes, Kushi. You can actually unmute yourself and ask. Your hand was raised. But I think you already have put something in the chat box. Okay, it was raised by mistake. But you do have something in the chat box. Is it because story was predictable? That's why they added while recalling. No, it's not because of that. Story is very ambiguous in nature instead. What does it mean by predictable? Meaning that the reconstruction process is predictable and not the story line or the plot being predictable. What this means is not that storyline or the plot is predictable, but the reconstruction process is predictable. Right? So that is the difference. Okay, so now we will move on to the next person, which is Elizabeth Loftus. And I also shared a video of her in the WhatsApp group. I hope that you watched it and I hope that it made sense to you because that video will lay the foundation of what we'll be doing today. So, who is Loftus? Basically, she is a very famous cognitive psychologist and she's done a lot of work, especially in memory. What kind of work? She has done a lot of work in the field of eyewitness testimony, in the field of law, and she also carries a similar understanding as Bartlett. The same thing that memory is a reconstructive process. And she has done some very interesting experiments that I will be drawing and explaining to you. So it will make a lot of sense to you. Okay. So let me take you through two of the very important experiments done by Loftus. First one is the car crash experiment, and another one is it's called Lost in the Mall experiment. So We will read these slides, but let me first find a place where I can draw and explain these to you. Okay, so we have an empty slide, little blank slide here. We'll be using that just for drawing purposes. Okay, so ignore the text that is written on this slide. I just need this space for creating some drawings. Okay, so this is the car crash experiment by Loftus. Okay, so Loftus actually invited participants, like how it happens in most of the experiments, and these participants were made to watch a video clip. Now, what was happening in the video clip? There were actually two cars. This is car 1, and let's use green color for the other car. This is car 2. Now, what is happening in the video clip is that these cars are actually, this car is coming from here and the green car is coming from this direction, and they actually just hit each other. That's what is happening in the video clip. All the participants are made to watch this video clip. Now, after they have watched this video clip, they are given a questionnaire. And in the questionnaire, they are asked two different things. Now, these participants are divided into two groups. So, group 1 and group 2. So, group 1 is asked the question that what is the speed of the cars when they hit each other? And group 2 is asked what is the speed of the car when they smash into each other? And they have to give their approximations in terms of kilometer per hour, whatever they think the speed is. Which group do you think gave a higher estimation of speed? Will it be group 1 or will it be group 2? And also notice the words that they have been given. Group 1 is said that when the cars are hitting each other, and group 2 is saying when they're smashing into each other. So what do you think? Group 1 or group 2 reports higher speed? Okay, so tell me a question based on your understanding. Which word seems more intense and extreme to hear, hit or smash, in terms of the severity or in terms of the intensity? Hit seems more intense or smash? Yes, smash seems more intense. Now tell me that if smash seems like a more intense word, which group is more likely to rate the speed of the cars being as higher? 1 or 2? Yes, group 2. So that is what was found in the car crash experiment. So group 2 reported a higher speed and group 1 reported a little lesser speed. And something very interesting, a very important finding was also that participants in group 2 also reported seeing glass pieces, broken glass pieces. When in reality, do you think broken glass pieces were there or were they not there? Now that we're understanding about reconstructive process, so do you think broken glasses were actually there, or is it again some reconstruction happening in group 2? Group 2 is saying broken glass is there, but in reality, it was not there. Yes, so that is something very interesting that we got to see. So that is all about crash experiment that we need to know. I will summarize it for you once again. It was done by Loftus. Participants were made to watch a video in which two cars coming in opposite directions were just hitting, you can say, into each other. Then later they were divided into two groups and they were asked, what do you think is the speed of cars when they're hitting versus what is the speed of cars when they're smashing into each other? And the results were that the group that was given the word smash reported a higher speed and they also reported seeing broken glass pieces even though there were none. So what is the conclusion of this? The conclusion of this is that leading questions Leading questions. What does leading question means? Leading question means basically when you are using a certain terminology or you're using a certain word that sounds leading to the other person, कि मैंने आपको कुछ word use किया और उसने आपको provoke किया, उसने आपको encourage किया कि आप एक अलग ही response दो. So that means a leading question. When I am feeding something into you already, and that very much is evident in the choice of words. Hit versus smash. So that is a leading question, right? The one मैं जिस group को hit बोल रही हूँ versus मैं जिसको smash बोल रही हूँ, that is a leading question because I have already suggested something. So that is why your response is also different. So that is the car crash experiment. Now we will read a little bit about it from the slides. If you have understood car crash experiment, you can respond with a thumbs up or you can just say yes in the chat box. If you have not understood, you can say no. वैसे ये थोड़ा simple concept है, इसमें कुछ ऐसा है नहीं जो आपको समझ नहीं आएगा. But फिर भी अगर कुछ नहीं समझ आए तो you can just say no in the chat box. Okay, so I'm taking it as a sign that most of you have understood it. Now let's read the slides also to enhance our information. So as we know that Bartlett is the one who started this work of constructive process and Loftus only added up to it. So Loftus's research emerged after the work by Bartlett, and she also had some modifications. She also had some extensions. There is actually a difference between Bartlett's approach and her approach. So the main difference lies in the fact that Bartlett proved the point that reconstruction is more of an internal process. Reconstruction is happening because our own experiences, our own beliefs, our own schemas manipulate our recall. But then Loftus is doing a more external process of reconstruction. She is trying to manipulate your memory externally. How? Because she's the one who used words like hit versus smash, right? So that is the main difference. To repeat it once again, if you've not understood, what is Bartlett doing? Bartlett is just saying that reconstruction happens as an internal process due to your own perceptions, your own information, your own knowledge, your own schema. But according to Loftus, it is more than just that. It is also about the fact that as a third person, if I am coming and I am suggesting you with certain things, if I am providing you some false information, then also it can reconstruct and change your memory, right? So that is her sharper question. Can memory be manipulated by external information? And the choice of words like hit and smash very much validates this fact because this is a third person external information that's coming from the outside. So her work has a lot of applications in law and eyewitness testimony, and her work has also proved the fact that just because an eyewitness is confidently giving a testimony that this is the criminal, this is not the criminal, we cannot take that as a guarantee because memories change over time and we don't want that an innocent person gets some punishment. So that's why evaluation of eyewitness evidence, this has actually happened, if you've seen the video that I had sent you, it was about an innocent person that was falsely um, convicted by a certain eyewitness who believed that he is the criminal, but in reality, he was not. The only reason why she felt that he was the criminal was because he looked a little similar to the actual criminal. And in reality, he was innocent, but then he had to go through a lot of trauma and all of that because of this mistake of the eyewitness. And then later he lost, I think he died after some years. Yes, so that just tells us that eyewitness testimonies are not always accurate. Why? Because memory keeps on getting reconstructed. So we cannot be confident about the fact कि ये तो accurate ही है, ये तो ऐसे ही रहेगी. And that is why she works in the legal settings also. Because we don't want that any innocent person gets some punishment. Yes. So I have already told this to you. I've already taught this, but we can just read this for better understanding. She is concerned with the reliability of memory in real world context, especially eyewitness testimony. Like I told you, an innocent person was convicted falsely by an eyewitness just because he looked similar to the actual criminal, and that is why he was sentenced to prison for some years. I think he spent some time there, but in reality, he was innocent. And the actual criminal is just roaming out free. So that's not a very good thing, right? So that tells us that whether memory provides an accurate record of past events or is it more prone to distortion. So the accuracy and the fallibility of eyewitness testimony, and also if I am feeding you in with certain pieces of information after the event has occurred, can it alter your memory in some way? So the same thing, I hope that now you've gotten a clear idea of what reconstructive memory is. And this difference between Bartlett and Loftus' approach, I've already told you. Bartlett used to say that memory is getting reconstructed more internally, but Loftus is like, no, no, it's not just about internal reconstruction. If I come and I suggest you with certain information, I give you certain leading questions, I present you with things that never happened, then also I can change your memory. Right? So that is about it. And now, after these two slides, we'll be going to the last experiment by Loftus. So Loftus, the work of her was actually very objective in nature. A lot of experimental methods were used, very systematically done, deliberately manipulated the independent variable. In the car crash experiment, can you tell me what was the independent variable that was manipulated? Yes, Drisha. So she actually did support internal processes, but she also went a little beyond that, and she said that it can also be changed by external processes. Okay, now answer my question. In the car crash experiment, what is the independent variable which is getting manipulated in both the groups? ऐसी क्या चीज है जो दोनों ग्रुप्स को डिफरेंट दी गई थी? We know what is independent variable, right? Research, when we do in our main course, I will teach you all types of variables. Okay, please do not confuse independent and dependent variables here. Independent variable is the one that is manipulated, and dependent variable is the one that is measured. So, what am I measuring? What am I manipulating? Am I manipulating words or speed, or am I measuring words or speed? Tell me only about independent variable. What is getting manipulated? Tell. What is getting manipulated? That is the independent variable. So, what is IV? Independent variable in car crash experiment. Be more specific. The words, the type of question, leading questions, intensity of the words, terms, the verbs. Yes, so that is independent variable. Now, if I ask you what is dependent variable, can you tell me that? Dependent variable is what is measured at the end. So, what is dependent variable in Loftus experiment? Speed. Yes. So, in context of the car crash experiment, the IV which is being manipulated is the choice of words, and dV, which is getting measured, is the speed. Yeah, so deliberately manipulated the independent variable, the wording of the question, introduce misleading information to then measure that how will reconstruction take place. And by certain combination of these, that is how she used to work. And the car crash experiment tells us about the leading questions paradigm, which I've already told you. Hit and smash are two types of words that help us understand leading questions. आप hit बोलोगे तो आप lead कर रहे हो कि speed कम है, अगर आप smash बोल रहे हो तो आप lead कर रहे हो participants को कि speed ज्यादा है. Now we will understand the false memory paradigm and the lost in the mall experiment after we've read this slide. To see this is the leading question study. Loftus and Palmer investigate how the wording of questions influences memory for an event. Participants were made to see certain videos and they were asked to estimate the speed by using two differently worded questions like how fast when they hit each other, how fast when they smashed each other. Now, the verb smashed sounds so much more intense and severe than the word hit, so that is why this group gave a much more higher speed. And they also reported seeing broken glass, which in reality was not there. Okay. So now this tells us about the leading questions. Hit and smash are two leading words. It can misinform you, it can alter your memory in some way. And now we will move on to the false memory study. This is Lost in the Mall experiment, which is done by Loftus and colleagues. Okay. So all of you must be in your late teens or maybe in your early 20s. Now, what if some relatives come up to you and they tell you that, do you know when you were a child, you got lost in a mall? Do you know when you were a child, then you ate this stone or you ate this non-edible thing? Do you know when you were a child, you used to do this, you used to do that? Do you know when you were a child, we went to this mela and then you got lost there and then you were crying and all? So, has it ever happened with you? Relatives do come and tell us, right? And do you think we are likely to believe what they say, or are we um, dismissing what they say? Relatives do come up and tell us certain stories, right? When you were a child, you got lost. When you were a child, you ate this. When you were a child, you did this, you did that. You used to say this, say that. So most of us, do we believe them कि ये बोल रहे हैं तो ऐसा ही हुआ होगा? Or do we dismiss them कि ये तो ऐसे ही हैं तो कुछ भी बोलते रहते? We do believe them, right? So that is the Lost in the Mall experiment. That's exactly what Loftus did. She got some participants and then she reached out to the relatives of the participants and then she asked them that why don't you plant certain false memories in the minds of these participants? False memories meaning events that have never occurred. So that is the meaning of false memory. आप सच में नहीं घूमे थे मेले में या मॉल में, but your relatives are telling you that this happened, so you believe them. And later you will also report, you will also admit, yeah, I got lost, even though this never happened, even though you don't have any memory of it. But just because your relative is saying that you got lost, you believed them, and you believed it so strongly that you are literally forming it as one of your own memories. So that is how a false memory has been created. ये सच में नहीं हुआ पर आपको लग रहा है ये हुआ इसलिए तो false memory create हो गई, right? So once again, she's trying to understand whether false autobiographical memories meaning memories of our own life. Can memories of our own life be created through suggestion? Participants were presented with descriptions of childhood events which their relatives had given. You got lost there, or you were drowning in the ocean, or the dog started chasing you, whatever it is. And the participants did accept कि हाँ ये तो हुआ था, जबकि वो हुआ भी नहीं था. They were very confident in reporting that as well. So what does that tell us? Memories don't just get altered, memories don't just get distorted, but you can literally create false memories. So don't use it um, in a negative manner now that I've talked to you about it. But this just tells us you can create false memories in someone through suggestions. Okay, so that is all about Loftus that we need to know. We have the last two slides of some important keywords that just summarize everything that we have covered. What is misinformation effect? Meaning that when a certain event has occurred and I present you with certain information which is probably wrong or which did not happen, it will alter or it will distort your memory. Yes, Manvi, your hand was raised in between.
Yes, I'm audible.
Yes.
I think there was some confusion in the previous experiment that you explained. So the explanation was more towards the subjective one, but actually, like, I just wanted to add this particular thing that it was not that the relatives were the one who were explaining or maybe who were persuading them, but it was just like a list of memories given to them. Maybe you can say 10 to 15 memories, and in that list, just one memory was the false one, which actually didn't happen, and they were asked to select how many memories are the ones that they can surely say that happened to them. So there was nobody leading them, but it is just that in a set of 10 to 15 real memories, just one was fabricated, and still they chose that yes, that memory also happened to me. So I think the explanation went towards a little bit of subjective end. So maybe you were trying to say the same thing, but a little confusion might have happened. So I just wanted to clarify this particular thing.
Yes. Now, thank you for sharing your perspective and insight on this. So, Loftus had actually made a lot of variations of the same experiment, and what you're saying is actually one of the variations, but the most simple one is the relatives one as well. And I'll also share this video on the WhatsApp group. All of you can watch it, and you will understand the different variations. Now, we don't have to go into so much depth for our entrances, but out of interest, if anybody wants to just, then they can watch it. Yes, but thank you for your input also. It's very helpful. It just adds into more and more information for students. Yes. So coming back to this, the misinformation effect. What did I tell you? After an event happens, you present your participants with certain misleading information, and then on the basis of that misleading information, it leads to altering and distortion of that memory. Right? We have already seen that in our car crash experiment. Yes, broken glass, as I told you, in reality, it was not there. Also, false details, all these things were not there, but because they gave in certain information that is misleading, the participants ended up reporting that. Leading questions also we have discussed. We understood the difference between smash versus hit, and how, depending upon the type of question that you frame, depending upon the kind of suggestions or biased wording that you give, the framing, the language that you use, it also distorts memory to some extent. We have already seen that. And false memories also we have seen, this lost in the mall experiment that we're saying, events that never even happened with the participants, but they are themselves believing that this happened with them. So why is that happening? Because you have created a false memory. So sometimes students ask what's the difference between misinformation effect and false memory. Main difference being that false memory event has never happened. It never happened with you. Nothing even remotely close to it happened with you. But in misinformation effect, the event has happened. But later, you gave misleading information that the memory got distorted. So the only difference being कि false memory में event हुआ ही नहीं है पर आपको लगता है कि वो हुआ है, एंड मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन इफेक्ट में इवेंट होता है पर आप बाद में मिसलीडिंग इन्फॉर्मेशन देके मेमोरी डिस्टॉर्ट कर देते हो. दैट्स द मेन डिफरेंस. एंड दिस इज द लास्ट स्लाइड. We have already covered most of this. What is source monitoring error? You know, sometimes it happens with us that we are so confused whether did this thing really happen with me, or is it something that I'm imagining, or is it something that someone is telling to me? किसी ने suggest किया मेरे साथ या मैंने खुद ही imagine कर लिया ये मेरे साथ सच में हुआ था. When something like this happens, we get so confused that we are not even able to identify what is the actual source of this memory. Maybe this reminds me of the RCI example. Every time RCI releases a new notice and there is so much misinformation around, someone says something, then someone else says something. We get confused. Did RCI even release this information? Did RCI even release this notice? Or is this just an imagination that I'm having? Or did someone post about this? Someone posted the story, someone put on this WhatsApp group. So, what is the actual source of it? We are not able to correctly identify the actual source, the actual origin of the memory, and we just get confused. Did it actually happen, or is someone saying it, or am I imagining it? So, that is what source monitoring error is. Suggestibility we have discussed. When you use certain words, when you given your own suggestions, and sometimes because of the authority that you're bringing or some social pressure that you're having, we end up getting misinformed. We end up getting some distorted memories, and memory reconstruction we have already covered. So the conclusion of today's class is in one line: memory is not a passive but an active process. Memory can undergo reconstructions, and we have seen that in the work of Bartlett and Loftus through all the experiments. Now, as you know that after every class we solve MCQs, because no practice is complete without MCQ revision and all of that. So let's see how many do you get correct. That will tell us how much you have actually understood and how much you have not. So the first question is there in front of us. Which observation would most strongly contradict the idea of reconstructive memory? So whatever you think is the answer, you can put A, B, C, D in the chat box. So a lot of you are saying C. That is the correct answer. Why? Because recall remains verbatim across repeated attempts. We literally saw in the slide that this does not happen. What you recall after some years or after some time is an altered version of it. It is a reinterpreted version of it. It is not the same verbatim, right? And if you look at points A, B, and D, this is very much correct. We saw that in one of the War of the Ghosts experiment, we saw that participants were skipping details. Participants were making it much shorter. Participants were also adding British elements, meaning they are making it more culturally consistent for themselves. And they're also including details of their own interpretations. कि मुझे क्या समझ आया इस चीज से. So that is why A, B, and D will not be the correct answer, and C is the simplest choice, right? Okay, now let's move to the next question. So in Bartlett's framework, the tendency to reshape unfamiliar material into culturally familiar forms reflects. So what is the answer of this? Yes, this is also very simple. Effort after meaning, like I told you, they are putting in intentional and conscious effort to reconstruct or reinterpret it. So that is why effort after meaning. Now I am gonna tell you about an example and you have to identify is the answer B, C, or D. So when your mom prepares a grocery list for you and then she asks you that go and get bread, butter, eggs, milk, shampoo, soap, bed sheet, socks, comb, makeup, shoes from the market, but you only end up remembering bread, butter, and shoes at the end. And you only get that. And whatever she said in between, the soap, shampoo, and all, you have forgotten all of that. So what is this an example of? Yes, it is the serial possession effect. Serial possession effect also has two smaller effects inside it. What are they? The one in which you remember the elements which are in the starting of the list. What is that called? What is that effect? जिसमें आपको starting का याद रहता है. Primacy effect. And the one in which you remember the later material, that is recency effect. Yes. Then let's take one more question with this. So many times when you have to remember someone's phone number or a very long OTP or a very long code, and it's not possible that you can remember so many numbers at once, so you divide it into small groups. Let's say you have to remember the phone number of a person. Random number of this is so long, how can you remember this? So you put it into small chunks. 987, 653, 924. Then it becomes much more simpler. Then that is known as chunking. Yes. Okay. Now next, who emphasized the role of external factors rather than internal schemas in memory reconstruction? Just now we have covered this. Yes, Loftus said that if I am externally presenting you misinformation or things that never happened with you, can that still reconstruct your memory or not? Yes, so that is Loftus. Okay. Now, do you know who is the father of cognitive psychology? who is the father of cognitive psychology. Not a lot of you know it. It is Ulrich Neisser. And in actually the first unit of the UET PG, where we do schools of psychology, there are all the fathers of different schools of thought: structuralism, functionalism, psychoanalysis, then behaviorism, gestalt, humanism, existentialism, cognitive school, all of that. So that, of course, in the main course, everything is done. But for now, you know that he's the father of cognitive psych. When we are solving MCQs and certain terms come to my mind, I like to ask a lot of follow-up questions because you can be prepared. You know what entrances really ask you. Okay, next question. A witness reports seeing broken glass after being asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed? So, what does this demonstrate? Yes, misinformation effect. Just now we have seen that. Yes. Now, one more question I'm going to ask you. You know, it is often said that in the same classroom where you learn a particular topic and the same classroom where you go to give the exam, the recall is much better. So, what is the answer of this from A, C and D? आपने जिस क्लास में बैठ के लेक्चर अटेंड किया आपने उसी क्लास में एग्जाम दिया, सेम environment, same setting, same physical space. So what is that? Anyone else wants to try? Or maybe the answer of that is not among A, C and D. Actually wrong. So this tells me कि आपको memory chapter में काफी revision करने की जरूरत है. There is encoding specificity, and inside that we have context dependent memory and we have state dependent memory. So the answer of this is context dependent. It means the same physical space or the same physical setting where the encoding is done, the recall will be better there. And state is the psychological state that you are in or the physiological state that you are in at the time of encoding. वही recall के time पे होना चाहिए, right? तो देखो रिविजन की नीड है. That is why I say that the earlier you start your preparation, the better it is. What are you waiting for? You will not get this anywhere else. Who will come and ask you such follow-up questions? Okay, next. Which of the following is least consistent with Bartlett's findings? This also I told you very specifically by putting a star in class. So if you are not able to answer this, then that will be very bad. Yes, see, thank you for giving the right answer. Memory events are random and unpredictable. ऐसा थोड़ी है. What did he say? Memory errors are very structured. Memory errors are very predictable. Yes, so that was what came out in Bartlett's findings. Okay, next. Which of the following would most likely reduce the misinformation effect? Okay, getting some mixed answers in this. What did I tell you in the beginning of the class about the time elapsed? The more the amount of time is elapsed, the more inaccuracies there will be there in the memory. So with that logic, doesn't it mean that if you are recalling immediately, right after some event occurs, then the misinformation effect will be lesser, right? So A will be the correct answer. Why? Because the lesser the time that has passed, the lesser the misinformation will be there. Because उतना ही तो कम time होगा reconstruction का, right? And you are not even exposing the person to new information. So how can misinformation effect even happen? Next, we know that leading questions leads to misinformation effect. If you make it more and more emotional, let's say that they say ki couple, happily married couple was going and they were moving into their house for the first time ever, but unfortunately the car smashed. So you might get more misinformed if such emotional details are also added. So this will also lead to misinformation effect. And if you keep on repeating misleading information, of course, misinformation effect will increase, right? So that's why A is the correct answer. Next. So which process best explains why two people remember the same event differently? Yes, schema-driven reconstruction and Bartlett's work, we have covered that in class already. So that is why this is the answer. Now, this is the last question for us. And I spent a considerable amount of time explaining this, so I hope that you'll get this right. Reconstructive memory is most strongly associated with, yes, top-down processing. I spent a lot of time covering this, right? This is also called constructivism. In our main courses, when we study perception chapter, I will teach top-down processing, bottom-up processing in a lot of detail. Constructivism is also something that will come at that time. So with this, we are done with the MCQs. And now what is your level of understanding of this topic from 1 to 10? Or 0 to 100 only? Like in the beginning, a lot of you were saying 0, 0, 0. Some of you said 10. And Abhishek, where did you go? Usma, where did you go? Isha, where did you go? You had 80-80 understanding, right? So now I think it should be full 10 on 10, full 100. Yes. So make sure that you are revising this content, the notes that you've made after this class. And the next morning also you attempt the mock test. Then these concepts will be strengthened very well and you will not forget them. Yes, so that brings us to the end of our class. And I hope this was helpful. We will be meeting once again in the next class, and the schedule is already posted on the WhatsApp group. You know what we will be covering in the next class. I think we are doing biopsychology, but I'll recheck and let you know once again. You can also check in the schedule. So yes, that was it from my side. It was nice to teach you all. I always enjoy this, and keep revising and start your preparation soon, please. Don't wait. क्या करोगे वेट करके कॉलेज एग्जाम्स आते जाते रहते हैं स्टार्ट इट एज सून एज पॉसिबल यू नो देयर आर सो मेनी थिंग्स दैट you don't even know exist in the preparation syllabus and all, but once you get into it then you realize, and by that time it's very late. So start as soon as possible, is for your benefit only. Time goes very fast and you won't even know. You think that, oh, CUET is very far away, this exam is very far away, we time hai, we'll prepare later. But time passes very quickly and competition and all is also increasing. This year the paper was very tough, so please, it's for you only. The earlier you start, the better it is. स्पीड इज डीवी एंड नॉट मेमोरी, क्योंकि वो यही मेजर कर रहे हैं ना कि ज्यादा तेज किसने बोला, ग्रुप 1 ने या ग्रुप 2 ने. सो द थिंग दैट वी आर अल्टीमेटली मेजरिंग, दैट इज द डीवी. आर वी मेजरिंग आपको कितना याद है, और आर वी मेजरिंग कि आपने क्या स्पीड रिपोर्ट करी. So that is why speed will be DV, and hopefully in the main course we will be teaching you stats in a lot of detail. Independent variable, dependent variable, confounding variable, extraneous variable, intervening, mediating, moderating. There are many types of variables. So ये समझने के लिए अगर आपकी basics clear नहीं है, आपको वो समझना पड़ेगा पहले. Yes. Okay, so on that note, let's wrap up today's class and I'll see you all in the next class. Okay, bye. Take care, everyone.